At this point, I think we have Mr. Deosthalee with us. Mr. Deosthalee, what is your first reaction to the GDP numbers and how do they impact a company like yours?
These numbers are on expected lines. Everybody was talking about 5% for the year and around the same level for the last quarter. So there are no surprises in this, except for the fact that the industry numbers and manufacturing numbers, which were very poor in the earlier quarters, have somewhat stabilized. That's what it looks like. And the construction sector numbers look okay. The only point which I have on these numbers is the services, and that is the community and social services sector, where there has been a significant reduction. And I think that is also a factor which is resulting in tighter liquidity in the system, because the money supply situation currently doesn't look to be good. Banks are borrowing heavily from RBI. It's almost about 100,000, 1 lakh crores. That's the number which is there. And I think if the deposit rates have to come down, the lending rates have to come down, I think that situation needs to be corrected. So I think the government spending, and there is a valid reason for that. I think they want to control fiscal deficit, and as a result of which it appears that there is a tightening of these discretionary spending to some extent, and that is resulting in very tight liquidity situation in the system. And unless that gets corrected, even if the interest rates are lowered, I don't know whether they will be passed on to the consumers, because deposit rates have to come down. That's the key to the lending rates coming down.
But Mr. Deosthalee, deposit rates as it is, savers are complaining. Sorry, Mr. Deosthalee, please carry on.
Of course, but the no, the point is that ultimately liquidity in the system has to improve if the banks have to do something as far as deposit rates are concerned. See, the issue here is not about depositors complaining, etc. Depositors complaining because inflation levels were very high. If the inflation level comes down and becomes somewhat reasonable, and hopefully that's what everybody is expecting. So if that happens, I think the depositors will be somewhat okay. But I think it is absolutely essential for the deposit rates basically to come down if the lending rates have to come down. So I think that is the crux of the matter. And the complaints about depositors is different. It is related to inflation. And inflation has remained at a very elevated level for quite some time. And there are some signs of easing of the situation, and let's hope that the trajectory continues, so that there is some room for the banks to cut deposit, provided I think the flow of deposits increases, and that is dependent on the liquidity in the system. You also asked a question on the impact on the company. I think as far as the business is concerned, the financial services business, because I'm concerned with, I'm involved in the financial services business. Ultimately, it is also dependent on what's happening in the economy. So I think it's essential for us to look at GDP numbers, industrial numbers, and also some of the other numbers like the construction, as I talked earlier. But I think we are today faced with a situation where there are several structural issues which needs to be first sorted out before the economy improves. And there is a tremendous need to really focus on infrastructure and the structural issues related with infrastructure sector. So that is very important for the financial services sector to also improve, because today, unfortunately, the situation is that there are not many good projects, very few projects to lend. And of course, luckily for our company, we are a diversified company, and therefore the retail growth still looks okay, and consumption-oriented growth is still there. But ultimately, that will also catch up. So I think what is essential is to focus on infrastructure, focus on structural issues of infrastructure such as coal, which is very important for the power sector. Also expediting awarding of contracts for roads, and there are several other related issues. And one more important thing which we have been talking for last 1 year, that is the dues of public sector undertakings to private sector. There is a substantial amount which is pending, and I think that pipeline needs to be cleared so that their working capital situation of the companies improve. Also, there will be some leeway for them to invest. Today, unfortunately, many companies don't have that. They're stretched, and therefore there are not many projects which they can really look at. First of all, there are not many projects, and the other thing is that the balance sheets of many companies are stretched. So I think on balance, the answer is the GDP numbers do not really tell us anything about what we should do in our business. What is essential is government action on many fronts to kickstart the economy.
Mr. Deosthalee, we just had Dr. Bimal Jalan, former governor of the Reserve Bank, with us earlier, and he was saying actually that it is now politics that is dominating economics, and many of the problems we are seeing today is that because politics has had such an overriding impact on economics that no policy decisions are being taken, delivery becomes an issue. You use the word structural issues. Now, are these structural issues in any way linked to political problems? Are we seeing this is the outcome of political lethargy, policy paralysis, and how long can we live with something like this?
Well, this is a very, very important question. There are some issues which are definitely political in nature, and therefore they are actually stalled because of politics. For example, this very important issue of foreign direct investment in insurance. You see, what is happening in India today is that our current account deficit is getting financed to a considerable extent by foreign institutional flows. And I think they are volatile flows. What we need is substantial increase in FDI. And unfortunately, in the last year, the foreign direct investments have actually come down as compared to the previous year. So we definitely need long-term flows. Now, at the same time, there are some issues like FDI in insurance, which are stalled. And there is really no reason why such issues should get stalled, because the country doesn't lose anything. You get foreign long-term flows. The control doesn't go out of Indian promoters. So really speaking, and I think we get knowledge of global markets as far as the sector is concerned. I'm just giving you one example. So in some of these areas, certainly politics is really coming in the way, and that is probably the price which we are paying because of the coalition government which we have at the center, and unfortunately in some of the states as well. But there are some issues which are not necessarily political. I gave one example of FDI in insurance, but there are several other issues which also can be, we can work on them. For example, coal. Now, as far as coal is concerned, it is essential that Coal India increases the production. Now, Coal India is the only company which today entity which produces coal. We need to have many more, and it's not going to happen overnight, but I think we need to kickstart the process of private sector participation in this. So there are various ways. You can unbundle some of the subsidiaries of Coal India. There are various other ways by which you can encourage private participation in this, but I think that is something which is essential given the current situation. Secondly, we have to import coal, because in any case, for all the power plants which are going to be in production in this year, next year, or till 2015, we don't have sufficient coal, and in any case India is importing coal. We will have to import coal. Now, under the circumstances, we also need to look at this pool pricing of coal, blending of imported coal price and the domestic. All that is required. So I think what I'm saying is there are some issues which are long-term structural issues, but they need to address, and they are not necessarily political.
So Mr. Deosthalee, I appreciate that, but the point remains that they still stay in place, and they probably also having an impact on the currency. Just wondering, I'm not asking you for levels, but it's a bit of a spiral that we are in. How do you expect the currency to behave in light of all the concerns that you've just mentioned?
Well, luckily for us, I think the commodity prices remain soft, and we are a large importer of oil. We are also importing gold, and now there are some other commodities also which we are importing. So at least in the near future, it will give some kind of a respite to rupee. It might, but at the same time, the other problems continue, and that is the exports, very poor growth in exports, at the same time, and lower growth in FDI. So on balance, and more importantly, the overall outlook. 5% is definitely a decent growth as compared to what's happening in the world, but considering Indian economy and its potential, certainly there is tremendous scope for us to increase. And I think people are looking at reforms, people are looking at action on the ground. So considering all that, the overall outlook may not necessarily be very positive. So on balance, the tendency of rupee is likely to weaken. I am not here to suggest that rupee will substantially weaken, but I think the overall trajectory will be for rupee to weaken.
Mr. Deosthalee, appreciate you taking the time out, and it's been great having you with us with all of your opinion on the show. Shashank, wanted to get it back to you. So to sum it up, do you think that lower growth